ever you are considering buying the game Shroud of the Avatar, here is an important warning before you do so. In order to silence criticism, the developers of the game will attempt to forge claims of you committing crimes against them while simultaneously protecting those within the community who will stalk, harass and attempt to harm you directly. And will probably attempt to DMCA strike this video too, but all imagery and commentary is fair use and in pursuit of defending myself and others from Portalarium's immoral and illegal attempts to deliberately defame innocent people, simply because they can't deal with the fact that their product is so widely and justifiably disliked. This video will document the undeniable proof that not only are the claims of the individual developers literally impossible, that both he and Portalarium as a company are fully aware of the validity of harassment complaints from numerous former backers, but have chosen instead to engage in vicious defamation against anyone who they feel personally slighted by, in effect trying to gaslight the victims of appalling abuse by claiming that they themselves are as horrendous as the experiences that they have just suffered. This video will in turn be genuinely angry, because the offence caused and the immorality of the actions is genuinely outrageous. This may make it an uncomfortable listen, but when someone tells you they've been harmed, sounding angry is a usual consequence of that hurt, not an excuse for why you shouldn't believe them. If someone is in pain, a decent person stops to help them rather than judging them. This video then is an appeal to all decent people out there to hear the truth. So let's begin with Portalarium inventing criminal acts and using them to abuse their own community. Firstly, the essential background information. On February the 17th, 2018, a real money trader in the game, and a notorious real-life scammer, puts up a thread on the official forums organising an attempt to get the remaining Shroud backers to change the media coverage. One of the developers of Shroud, Star Long, proceeds to go to many of the linked comments himself in order to post. In particular, he responds to the quick list of all the issues with the game that I personally have posted. Here he is at rockpapershotgun.com making the claim that, quote, "It is worth noting that we have been the target of an organised campaign for the last several years by a group of individuals who post on every website, review, social media, etc. that mentions or features the game. Not only is it unbelievably hypocritical, coming as it does directly from his own community's attempts to organise a campaign, he fails to mention, but I make sure to remind him of the time when he personally called in the official Shroud newsletter to manipulate the Steam reviews. Quote, "The not so good news is that some of them are giving us bad reviews. Just recently we dropped from very positive to mostly positive. Long term this will decrease the number of people who purchase our product on Steam and therefore will mean we will have less money to build this world we all want." End quote. Shroud of course has since dropped from mostly positive down to mixed because the game is bobbins. And here he is on Eurogamer, copying and pasting the same comment that he just put up on Rock Paper Shotgun. He also copies it to an MMORPG.com article, and just in case you still aren't convinced, back at Eurogamer another developer, one Chris Spears, arrives. But he's promptly deleted, or self-deletes, for being unprofessional and abusive. Now, with that context in mind, here comes the poisonous attempts to forge claiming your critics are actually criminals. On March the 6th, 2018, an article went up on massivelyop.com attempting to claim that as Shroud approached the official launch, and quotation marks around that launch by the way, because they actually stopped wiping the servers and allowed real money trading to begin in July 2016. But as quotation marks launch is 2 weeks away, Shroud had supposedly seen an enormous growth in players. At least, amongst those as Richard Garriott, aka Lord British, put it, those who haven't been indoctrinated. Yes, the weird belief that there's a conspiracy brainwashing people to dislike the game goes right the way to the top. Comments below the article, as with any article on Shroud, quickly become brutal because the game is genuinely disliked, and especially because people are offended by the prejudicial assumptions about people with genuine issues with the game, that they've somehow been indoctrinated by others. At which point, Chris Spears appears again, Now, bear in mind that the editor of Massively OP stated multiple times she believes this is the real Chris Spears. The thread is indeed being pre-moderated based upon the assumption this is the real developer. He at first attempts to claim that the critical commentary about the game's actual figures are false, because, as he claims, there's a publicly available API tool which allows you to track them. Only the thread he links to is part of a forum locked off to Developer Plus level pledges, that is, people who have spent $450 or more on the game. So most people aren't able to see this public tool. Later on, he admits they've not actually flagged the API thread to public and blames a forum change yesterday for that. Excuses, excuses. The Dev Plus forums themselves still state it's a bannable offence to share information from there outside the forums. So even if you could have found it, you couldn't openly use it in the way Chris Spears claimed without risking the rules being used against you. And who would trust these spiteful developers not to trigger those rules if you use it to prove the game wasn't doing well? Then, when user PostLarval points out that now everyone can actually see the tool, it's also password protected so people can't use it, Chris Spears attempts to slander former backers by claiming they'd only abuse it if they could, so they preemptively made it impossible to get into. This, remember, after first claiming the tool was open and free. Later on, it would turn out that even with access to the tool, no one is able to actually get the direct player numbers, so even what it does was a lie. And so then he just becomes bitter or drunk on his own poisonous feelings towards the people catching him out trying to lie about facts, and decides to then outright falsify them, committing crimes against them. Look closely at this statement from Chris Spears. Quote, "As for Starlong calling people trolls, no clue if he was talking to you, but it is well known that there is a group of about a half dozen people who troll us on every single website, who started on the IM group, side note, that stands for Insane Membrane, and used the Shroud Unlimited forums. They very publicly organised the trolling. When they were called on it, they doxed players and devs and posted social security numbers and our children's names and home addresses. Some of these same people are still here, as in they posted in this thread. 4 years later, posting the same hateful speech. When Star posted recently calling out trolls, he was calling out those guys. My honest guess is he wasn't talking to you." End quote. Remember the background we just talked about? The threads he's talking about are the ones where Starlong followed the organised community attempts to manipulate the negative coverage and specifically responded to me. When this weasel Spears then goes on to say they posted in this thread, he's trying to subtly point you towards the fact that I am indeed there on my YouTube account, which has reviews of Shroud of the Avatar on it. He's accusing myself and the user Insane Membrane of threatening his children 4 years ago. Now, do you know why this is provably a lie? Why it cannot possibly be true? Because the Shroud Unlimited forums didn't exist 4 years ago. The first ever post wasn't until February the 12th, 2015, only 3 years ago. But what Chris Spears and Portalarium are doing is far more sickening than you might realise. Because the Insane Membrane blog was recently deleted, Chris Spears seems to think he can get away with lying about what the content of it was. Only because we know this company is so appallingly dishonest, we've taken to archiving every form of communication and comment about them, so they can't manipulate moderation to remove it or lie about the facts to deceive innocent people. And we still had the archives of the actual Insane Membrane blog too. Here's the actual content he's referring to. This is Insane Membrane talking about how someone within their community was harassing him. Quote, "To the best of my knowledge, on or around August 22nd, 2015, someone paid to gather information about me and my family and began sending it to people that Insane Membrane had insulted. I know of at least 3 people who have seen this information now, and one of them indicated it was being put out there to certain folks. And with the amount of people Insane Membrane has parodied, you can bet there is more. This included everything from my name, my spouse's name, our kid's name, addresses, workplaces, phone numbers, passport numbers." End quote. Can you see it? Chris Spears literally took the commentary of someone saying they were a victim of harassment and tried to lie and said that individual had done it to him, even though the forum he claims it happened through didn't even exist in the timescale he claims. What makes it even more disgusting is you can still see the actual commentary on the Shroud Unlimited forums that were tied to the Insane Membrane blog, where both sides of the community, pro-Shroud and anti-Shroud, agree that doxing is immoral and wrong, and try and work out who the third party really doing it was. Here are the relevant comments from the thread tied to the post that Chris Spears has just literally lied about. From the user Dodgy, who is a raw-tongued critic, quote, "I am disgusted about that doxing shit. They paid someone, or did they do it themselves?" End quote. From Insane Membrane himself, the person Chris Spears has just tried to slander with his own complaints. Quotes, "Actually, that thread was started by the person who is harassing me. I played along to see what they would do. I left the thread up, but then they started downloading some pictures from my work Twitter account and changing their avatar with it. I killed it." Another quote, "I'm not sure I find anyone being doxed entertaining, and if I did, there was a misunderstanding. I didn't know, or at least didn't realise, anyone here other than myself was doxed. You must have thought it was me for the longest time, I'd guess. For the record, it was not." Quote, "The person who contacted me within the SOTA forums," Shroud of the Avatar of course, "said that the info was mailed to him. That seems to indicate it wasn't a PM originally." Quote, "There is one agenda for someone doxing them and us and pointing the finger at opposite parties. This, anarchy, it's what they do." End quotes. Then, from Themolock, a hyperbacker, talking about someone doxing members of the pro-Shroud community, quote, "I actually never thought it was you. I thought it was one of your members, and from memory, you, that is Insane Membrane, voiced disapproval at the time." End quote. Then you have Rathenix, who alongside Themolock was sent Insane Membrane's personal details. Quote, "I had my suspicions, and yes, I was, as Themo said, brackets, Rathenix equals Kazin in game, end brackets, attacked on multiple levels, but was a bit better prepared to deal with it. I even had said people delivering personal information about Acid to me," Acid is the username that Insane Membrane has on the Shroud of the Avatar forums, saying at that time that he was Insane Membrane. Even back then, I did not draw conclusions or lash out. If you will remember, I simply contacted you, brackets, Acid's Twitter account, to warn you that someone was getting this information and sending it out to people." Next quote, "I went directly to Acid when this happened, and I also reported it to the proper authorities in many levels. I take that kind of thing very seriously." Next, user Titsup, also known as Argyle, a more reasonable critic, said the following: "Doxing is for dicks, and I don't condone it or do it. I think it's a shitty, petty things to do. Doxing anyone related to this game deserves condemnation." And finally myself, as the user Nemo Lives, pointing out deliberately trolling people under Insane or anyone else's avatar makes no sense. Quote, "I'm personally sorry for the despicable way you were treated, but honestly, by believing such a simple act of deception, you were giving them more power than they truly have. Indeed, I'm rather tempted to think it's someone who doesn't care about the game either way. And the easiest way for them to get any sort of thrill in an otherwise wasted life, the sort of person who spends all day online abusing women because he was caught sniffing their bicycle seats at school." End quote. Are you following so far? Not only do Shroud's own backers confirm they received personal information about Insane Membrane, about the critic, not that he was sharing details about Chris Spears, they claim it's happened to them as defenders of Shroud as well too. And everyone there is united in condemning the doxing and sharing sympathy with each other, and all coming to the agreement that it's some unknown third party doing it to each other. And just to hammer the point home even further, there are multiple reports of harassments on Portalarium's own forums. Here is one user talking about the literal psychopathy within the community in a thread from December 2015. And here is the user Golem Dragon complaining they too had to go to the police because Portalarium were not protecting them from the harassment. But despicable developer with no morals Chris Spears attempts to use the terrible experiences of victims of harassment and what he thinks is Insane Membrane's own inability to now defend himself to try and blacken their name simply because he can't deal with criticism of his own utterly shit product. And he has history of this too. Under his Reddit account of Catnip Games, he tried to slander critics similarly in the past. You can see here he tries to claim he has archives proving once more there was an organised attempt through the Shroud Unlimited forums to harm the game. Because, like any cult belief system, the Shroudologists need an all-powerful enemy to hate, an enemy who must somehow be responsible for why the world rejects their supposed brilliance. Except, as I point out again, he can't even tell the truth about basic facts, whilst Portalarium have often been caught posting reviews on Steam without admitting that they were from staff. I publicly challenge him to prove even once where there was any attempt to organise in the opposite direction like he claims. And I quote just a sample of times where I say any such organisation isn't even necessary, and I wouldn't have sank that low anyway. To this date, Chris Spears still refuses to take up the challenge to publish this supposed evidence that he claims he has. Because, you see, Chris Spears is also aware of the fact that whilst all of the above could be total paranoid conspiracy theory bollocks, he knows damn well I've not only been harassed myself, but it escalated to hacking my email and a now year-long campaign of abuse and attempted gaslighting, leading to claims over Christmas that my family would be raped and killed if I didn't stop criticising the game, which has led me going to the police in the United Kingdom and the United States, and Portalarium knows this because they've had the proof since as early as November 13th, 2016, when I first gave it to them. And by now I have a good idea of who is behind it, an individual now known as Jammer Player, because he went batshit insane in late 2016 over someone commenting about a post he made under that name on Portalarium's own forums, and he started sending people bizarre, incoherent, vile images about trying to control and terrify one critic, and bragging he was hopefully making that critic afraid for his own children's safety. And he tried to claim Portalarium or the community were actively helping him do this. And I contacted Portalarium's community moderator Beric in November 2016 and told him that this user was openly using Portalarium's name to make backers feel afraid he had their personal details. Nothing, however, was done. By February 19th, 2017, he had directed his attention towards me, and had hacked into my email and started posting obsessively about me on the Shroud's official forums too. So I contacted Portalarium again and warned them it was escalating and they needed to consider acting against this individual. Just to give you a sense of how fucked up this freak show is, Noganu, the obvious sock puppet ranting about me whilst Jammer Player responded in agreement, was made the day the forums went live in 2013 before any of us former backers were even critical. And at the same time I made my first report to the UK police about this. On May the 1st I received my first response back. They didn't feel they had a chance of prosecuting but didn't explain why. So I put up a post on the Shroud Unlimited forums detailing all my experiences so far. You remember, the forums Chris Spears tried to claim is a hotbed of organising harassment of him. You can see that I list my initial contact with Hotmail, my full correspondence with Action Fraud, that is the British National Fraud Police, up to that date, and that 2 other people connected with criticising Shroud were hacked at the same time. And the fact that he's clearly still using throwaway accounts to try and gaslight me in the meantime. And then, after posting on this obscure forum, where, don't forget, according to Chris Spears, only a tiny number of nasty people who hate Shroud lurk, someone decides to bombard my email with proxy attempts to log in again in order to mock what I just posted. This is what gave me the evidence to make my second crime report, which I submitted on the 22nd of May, pointing out that it's clearly somebody attacking me because of my posting on Shroud of the Avatar. Following up on this, on May the 29th, 2017, I emailed Richard Garriott himself in order to threaten his No, of course not. To tell him someone within the community seems to have compromised their database, which is why we suspected a wave of connected hacks. That I have to even detail this because people out there blindly believe what a developer said just because they're a developer is staggering. But there it is. On the very forums that are supposed to be a hate site, you can see me contacting Richard Garriott directly and trying to politely get him to address the fact that there's someone seriously screwed up within their community. I've only just begun to detail what happened too. Over summer, Jammer Player slowly collapsed into complete psychosis. Like with the previous user he was obsessed with, he tried to seed references to the film Romper Stomper to suggest that I was going to get a similar style beating, whilst deliriously ranting to himself some weird things about hobbits and claiming to have mysterious plans to harm me. By August 2017, he was shutting down any accounts of mine he could find online by bombarding them with failed password logins. Here is just one example of having to sort it out with regards to accounts held by Electronic Arts. Meanwhile, on Reddit, he's totally out of control, making endless alt army accounts and openly stating the attacks on my accounts are connected to my criticism of the game, whilst, as you can see from the only thread he made on that one before it too was nuked by the full site admins, trying to claim he was recruiting people into harming my mental health. All the time during this, behind the scenes, he's trying to drive me mad by all kinds of ridiculous schemes in private messages, like this one where he claims Portalarium has arranged for me to be arrested, because obviously the police work on appointment and keep someone called Turkey Basted Your Girl in the loop on that. You fucking lunatic. By October he was barely able to function without repeating my name or something I'd said. He started ranting on about laying traps for me across multiple forums and was linking anyone I knew to his insane Imager account, an account containing 6 years of hate, racism, comments on which women deserve to be raped, but towards the end just post after post obsessing about me. And in a post that has to be seen to be believed, he openly claimed he was controlling Portalarium's own forums and using them to harm critics, and naming a, quote, negativity forum idea as the way in which he thought he was doing it. On November 29th then, I contacted Portalarium and explained that he wasn't able to even hide anymore how he was breaking the rules and trying to abuse your community moderator Beric now. And still no action is taken against him, at least by Portalarium. Imager ban him the moment I send in a report. He's now banned on site on Reddit for months at this point, but not by Portalarium. We know they're disgusting liars and money-obsessed monsters, but those of us who haven't yet bowed out before all of this sociopathic bullying can't work out why he remains unbanned, even when he's caught openly mocking Portalarium and bragging he controls them in order to forward his hateful schemes. And it escalates even further. Because his trap failed to work on me, he spirals further down into madness. He starts making new Imager account after Imager account, each one banned as soon as it turns up, but he continues posting endless comics he's making devoted to his weird fantasies about me, that he PMs again to anyone I know to try and get around my blocking him. It's hard to know what he's even trying to say in these literally broken images. Something about either I'm controlling everyone by hypnosis, or who the hell knows what goes on in the twisted brain wrong of a one-off man-mental. Now I expect it's exhausting you, the viewer, trying to keep track even of this simplified report of over a year of insane harassment. But we're now at the point where things come back to why Chris Spears, the actual developer, is a poisonous little toad, so hang in there. Over Christmas 2017, the genuinely sick Jammer player goes completely over the line. After manipulating the moderators on one subreddit via sock puppets, he briefly manages to get me a ban. He proceeds to go back to the official Shroud forums, gives himself crowns in his username, and rewrites it to brag about how he's supposedly beaten me, and says, "Goodbye, old friend." Only when the ban turns out to be temporary, he's driven to a rage-filled madness. He takes over the entire older, largely dead subreddit with endless posts dripping with hatred about me. He writes a pages-long screed listing in excruciating detail all the paths his madness takes in how he's trying to, quote, weaponize moderation, but substitutes my name for his all the way throughout, while screaming to himself variations on toodles because I once tricked him into saying it. Then he does the same but with a guide to how to gaslight people and try and harm their mental health, that I supposedly was doing again. He tries to suggest that somehow, hint hint, criticising the game any further would lead to someone raping and killing my family, and on Christmas Day, Christmas fucking Day, this lonely lunatic, knowing I live in the UK, tries to suggest he was coming here, looking for weapons, and had unfinished business to take care of. In the comments, he outright devolves into talking about swatting people. One insensitive fool even posts an address for him to also visit on, which he then has to go back and delete because 3 days later someone is shot and killed in Wichita as an innocent victim of a swatting over a computer game. Unfortunately, Reddit are away for the holidays, so the forums are a shit show for nearly a month, but this finally gives me the opportunity to break open the police in the UK. Imagery here will be a little vague because the case is still ongoing and I'm in the process of triggering an arrest warrant and Portalarium knows it. So, because I have a clear, constant evidence of direct harassment and threats, I'm able to use the Avon and Somerset's own guidelines to get through to a different department. They in turn take a third report, look closely at the law and call back to explain the actual limitations within UK law. Without proof he's located here or the data itself is stored here, they cannot investigate. But I can ask the local authorities in Austin, Texas to do so as an individual because the identifying data for Jammer Player is held on their servers, and then come back to the UK if he's here and trigger an arrest, or alternatively appeal to the law wherever he really is. On January the 10th, I fill out a form listing as much information as I can ready for the prosecution. In the meantime, someone who has seen my posting on Reddit turns out to be a lawyer in Austin, Texas, and is prepared to help prosecute the case there too. We find a local officer in Portalarium's own area prepared to execute a search warrant upon Portalarium's officers, and who asks for a covering letter from Avon and Somerset to express it would help their case here. By the 3rd of February 2008, in the meantime, the screwed-up Jammer Player has been caught having purchased an account called Sempiternal Dragon on the forums, and pretending to be the former owner in order to misdirect any risks onto him, the former owner being a well-respected Ultima Dragons internet chapter member, has been using it to also harass people and post endless ridiculous claims to make the community look stupid, such as, for instance, claiming Portalarium should order a cease and desist against massivelyop.com for their negative coverage of Shroud. And still Portalarium won't act, except to make him change his username on that account, which he changes to Toodles because he's still obsessed with me. But I noticed there's a new community moderator from one of Portalarium's partners, a user called Ceres, and I contact him to give Portalarium one last chance to deal with this before I have to start opening up legal action to force them to identify the individual they're clearly protecting. Here is just a sample of the data that I give to Portalarium and Ceres. I've censored one line because I list the person from my emails that Jammer Player is dropping hints about raping. But I point out that she is the girl he wants me to think of in the username. I also removed the crime reference number because it's still active. But did you also spot the line reminding Portalarium of how Jammer Player put "Goodbye Old Friend" in the title of his account there when he thought he'd got me banned? You might have seen that somewhere else too, and not just in this video previously. Yes, Chris Spears, the developer, was echoing the same childish attitude, just in the hopes of offending someone who dared ask him to be honest with the player numbers. Do you see now what I mean? Not only did Portalarium know that I'm right on their fucking door with legal action, that I have an enormous amount of proof that it happened, but these unprofessional, hate-filled shitheads not only don't care that they deliberately tried to blacken an innocent person's name with the harassment I'm actually the victim of. Chris Spears is directly laughing about the things said when trying to address it, just in order to upset people. And Chris Spears has a history of this too. Here he is acknowledging that he's aware of the claims I made about being hacked on the Shroud Unlimited forums, those claims that I put up earlier, and completely misrepresenting what I actually said happened in order to mock it again. At the time, I wondered if someone had merely hacked their insecure WordPress forums in order to get shared passwords. But now, I wouldn't put it past someone at Portalarium to genuinely be supporting any attempt to harm critics of the game. After all, just look at how fucking huge the lies they're prepared to tell are, and the dirty tricks they're prepared to play, just to try and harass into silence the people who legitimately criticise their genuinely crap project. And do you, the outsider, really want to risk giving your personal details to these toxic twats when they behave so sinisterly with them? So remember what Shroud of the Avatar really is. Because the game is based around real money trading, you, the backer, will never be appreciated enough. Want the Golden Castle? That's going to cost you $30,000. But if you ever criticise the game, you risk the developers forging accusations of crimes against you, and you are potentially putting your personal safety at risk on top of that. And Portalarium thinks that's funny. And Portalarium, you know who I am. You've got my records because I was a former backer too. So if you think you can prove I ever sank to the level of the community you're protecting, if you think you can somehow prove I threatened your children on forums that didn't even exist 4 years ago, you're welcome to try and prove it in a UK court of law. See you there.